telling you now.
Oh, okay. All right.
So, as I said before, in after World War I, the League of Nations in 1922 gave the French a mandate over Syria.
Mm-hmm.
So the French took Syria and boarded it off and created Lebanon. Mm-hmm. And under the mandate that the League of Nations gave the British not only created by boarding off Arabia to create Iraq, and boarding off Iraq to create Kuwait, the British in 1928 created Jordan, the country that we know today as Jordan, in 1928. Prior to 1928, was no Jordan, just a land area, a region. Mm-hmm. See, so all this is history, mm-hmm. You see. So that's where that goes. But you need to go back, because you're running ahead in certain spots in our interview. But you need to go back to the beginning of how Christianity and Judaism came into Ethiopia.
That's what I want you to do.
That's very
because
key.
I'm looking at these temples, and these temples look old to me, and they're telling me that they only go back to the 13th century. And I wanted you to deal with that, please.
Okay, I'm going to deal with that. But you got to understand something. Today, those temples are Christian temples, aren't they?
Yes.
I'm telling you how they got to be Christian temples, and then I'll tell you about the temples prior to them becoming Christian temples.
Okay, please.
Yeah,
continue.
You see, so you got the Church Missionary Society created by the Church of England in 1799. Mm-hmm. You got the Christian Society 10 years later in 1809, created by the Church of England. That society was to teach non-Christian countries Christianity. Mm-hmm. Fine. The first person that the Church of England sent over into Ethiopia to evangelize among the Ethiopians was a man by the name of Samuel Gobek. Mm-hmm. First one. Okay? That was in 1823. See? He couldn't get into Ethiopia in 1823. He had to spend 3 years in Egypt because there was some type of turmoil in Ethiopia. So after those 3 years was up, in 1829, around that area, he entered into Ethiopia. But he couldn't bring Christianity into Ethiopia because he couldn't speak the language of the Ethiopians. He didn't know what they were talking about. And they didn't know what he was talking about by him speaking English. So therefore, it was just a matter of getting acquainted with the Ethiopians, surveying what's over there, the whole area for the Church of England. In the meantime, the Jesuits from the Roman Catholic Church was over there also. And the Jesuits had told the Ethiopian rulers to get rid of the Church of England missionaries, to get rid of them from being over there. Mm-hmm. But that didn't happen. Now, the Church of England sent two other more men in 1838, Dr. C.W. Eisenberg, mm-hmm. and Dr. L.T. Graff, Grapf, over there in 1838. Mm-hmm. Dr. Eisenberg learned the Ethiopian language, and he went back to England, and he formulated what is known as an Ethiopian dictionary, mm-hmm. that the missionaries could learn from that dictionary how to speak the language of the Ethiopians. Mm-hmm. Thus, being able to read from the Bible to them in their own language and teach them the Bible, thus evangelizing them, making them Christians. Now, a lot of our scholars think that Christianity started there. Okay? No. If that was the case, if Christianity was already over there before the European missionary Christians got over there, then why would they allow any Christians from the Church of England or from the Jesuit priest society to come over there to evangelize among them, bringing Christianity? If they already had Christianity, okay? But they didn't. You see, so one has to realize that. And then you have, we're going to get to those churches, then you have the Philosophers living over there. The Philosophers was already there, and they were not Jews, okay? Until the Alliance Israelite Universal of Paris, France, sent Joseph Halevi over there in 1868 to introduce to the Philosopher tribe over in Ethiopia a form of Judaism by way of the Bible. If you notice, when the philosophers was taken out of, some of the philosophers was taken out of Ethiopia during the time of the vice presidency of George H. Bush in the 1980s, those Israelis, those Orthodox Israeli rabbis could not recognize those philosophers because they had been taught by Judaism by way of the Bible and not by way of orthodoxy. But anyway, Joseph Halevi was sent there to bring Judaism, introduce Judaism to the philosophers who was already there. And they sold them a story about Solomon and Sheba. See? And because they said, well, where's the Jews over here? They said, no, we don't have no Jews. Well, according to this Bible, you're supposed to have Melech, the descendants of Melech, who was the son of Solomon of the Bible, and Sheba of Ethiopia. You see? So that's how they sold that to them, without me elaborating on it, because that goes into another history. Now, so if the philosophers were already Jews, then why would they allow someone from the outside, some Europeans, to bring Judaism to them, which they already had, if that was the case? Then you got to go up into the Alliance Israelite Universal of Paris, France, also sending Jacques Faithlovich over there. You see what he did. That's another history. How Jacques Faithlovich was given a stipend for 1 year by Edmund James de Rothschild of France. You see, because the Alliance Israelite Universal of Paris, France was already in France. See, so that goes into another history. But anyway, let's get to those rock-hewn churches, okay?
Or temples.
Or temples. That's what they were called. They were temples dedicated to the homage of Osiris, Isis, and Horus. They were not churches. Okay? Because out of the ancient Egyptian culture, what do you have? Paying homage to Osiris, Isis, and Horus. That's what you have. Okay? So they kept that up ritualistically. Okay? And then they were also created those temples over there, and they went underground to do so they wouldn't have to be in contact with any of those European Byzantine rulers or Ottoman Turkish rulers, in case they came over there, which they didn't. They didn't penetrate that far south. And then when you study those rock-hewn churches, they tell you right off the bat, we do not know the origin, beginning of those churches. We don't know where they came from, or how they was built. Is that true?
But they are marvelous, and I mean, when you go into them and examine them, and they were hewn out of solid rock, but you find the walls are consistent and perfect both sides. And I was just wondering, I haven't seen anything like that except maybe looking at the construction of the pyramids.
Okay. Again, the Ethiopians are descendants of who? The ancient Egyptians. They're getting that type of building and concept of building from their ancestors. That's just like that church over the first Christian church, the Hagia Sophia over in Constantinople, was built and designed by African architects and builders. It's still standing today. It's a prototype for all mosques that is built around the world. It's a prototype for all the Capitol buildings that are built around the world, so those domes and things like that. You see? Now, again, they tell you about those rock-hewn churches that they don't have no knowledge of the origin, how and what year they began. They don't know that. Then you get an individual, as you study, will come and tell you in articles, in books and so forth, that these temples first began in the 4th century. Mm-hmm. That's not true. Mm-hmm. See, these temples today are Christian temples, is that right?
Yeah.
Christian churches, rather.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
In the 4th century, there was no Christianity. In the 4th century, there was no Christ. Mm-hmm. So they can't say that. That's out. Mm-hmm. So you have to go back to the drawing board and say, you don't know the beginning history of how and when those temples was built that are called churches today. Mm-hmm. You see? And because you can't use the 4th century, because there was no Christianity or Christ in the 4th century. Christ and Christianity began in the 5th century, mm-hmm. not the 4th century, mm-hmm. at the Council of Ephesus and the Council of Chalcedon.
Speaking of age, the age of Egyptian civilization and Ethiopia, as we're talking about Ethiopia, can we use the chronology of European sources to determine when the great building period in ancient Egypt and Ethiopia came about?
Well, you really can't, because, again, the ancient Egyptians never wrote a history of themselves. They left us a history of themselves as an immortal legacy in stone, in art, in their hieroglyphs, in their phonetic alphabet, in their papyrus, etc., etc. And they left us, for the whole entire world, their culture that is being used by the whole entire world, mm-hmm. by all races of people. So you really can't do that. But see, the Europeans, wanting to control the history and the culture of the ancient Egyptians, mm-hmm. in their institutions, they created a chronology for our ancestors, the ancient Egyptians, mm-hmm. by saying that Ptolemy II Philadelphus, the son and the successor of Ptolemy I Lagi, the first Ptolemy, that his son, with the help of Manetho, created a chronology for the Europeans, or for the Greeks. Mm-hmm. I'm coming along now, Clemson. My wife and I, Arnetta, we are writing a book at this very moment that I'm speaking to you, which will be out this year. It's called Reclaiming Ancient Egypt, mm-hmm. the repudiation of the Hyksos and the chronology of ancient Egypt, including the purging period. Mm-hmm. And this book is going to be a dynamite book, because we are putting a whole lot of information in this book that you can't get any place. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, I have a warning in this book. It says, warning to all African scholars. Mm-hmm. Do not use the chronology of ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. Because this chronology is written by Europeans using the Bible to do so, to authenticate it, mm-hmm. to give it authenticity. Mm-hmm. Okay? So you can't use that. So I'm warning them, because I'm putting in 5 different chronologies as an example. The first chronology comes out of a book that was printed in 1867 on a history of Egypt. They said that the first dynastic king was Mesram, and in parentheses they have Menes, M-E-N-E-S. Now Mesram, as the whole world knows, who reads the Bible, is supposed to be the son of Ham. And Mizraim was supposed to have a name that they attached to this Mizraim's name, Egypt. So Mizraim now is a part of the family and table of nations of the Bible. So you can't use that. And this first chronology, they said that the first dynasty was 2188 BC, using Mizraim in parentheses Menez. The second chronology I'm presenting comes out of a book that was created by James Henry Breasted in 1905, who was part of the University of Chicago teaching staff. His chronology is called A History of Egypt, that book. And his chronology, he starts it at 3400 BC, which is a 1212-year difference from the first one. You see? And he is saying that the first dynastic king was Menez. Okay? And the third chronology I'm presenting in this book that's coming out this year is from a book called Kingship and the Gods by Henry Frankfort. In this book, Henry Frankfort is saying that the first dynastic dynasty and king was Narmer Menez, added Narmer Menez, or Narmer to the name of Menez. And he is saying that the first dynasty of ancient Egypt was 3100 BC. All these different conflictions there. And then you go into my fourth chronology that I'm presenting. Comes straight out of the Bible. They said that the first dynasty was 2717. That was the first dynasty of ancient Egypt. And then the fifth one is a dynamite, because it comes out of a book that was written by George Rawlinson in 1876. And my very good friend, who I went to high school with, and was a musician with him on the scene in Chicago. He's a book buff. His name is Jimmy Ellis, fine saxophonist. And he called me up just this year. And he says, Walter, I got 3 rare books I want to give you. He said, they're better in your possession, where you can extract whatever information you can out of these books, because you're writing books, and then you can give it to our African community and into the world. He said, I'd rather have, for you to have these books than for these books to sit on my shelf to collect dust. And then one of these books he gave me was called A History of Ancient Egypt by George Rawlinson. And he wrote that in 1876. And he destroys all of the chronologies that are out there today. So that's going to be in my book. I want people to look for that book and look for this information. They can read it for themselves, and they'll open up their minds, and they'll begin to progress into development of themselves as human beings. Because every human has a right to grow. And we in the African community is no exception. We need to grow. Okay? It's going to be, you're going to have growing pains. You're going to find out things that you've been holding on for years is not true. Don't get mad at me. I didn't introduce you. I didn't tell you to believe that way. See, like people get mad at me because they say I'm taking their Jesus away. No, because I say there's no Jesus Christ. They get mad at me because I'm saying there's no Prophet Muhammad. They get mad at me because they say there's no Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, but Moses, and they want to be black Hebrew Israelites and so forth and so on. I did not tell you to be a Christian. So I have no right to come into your life to tell you not to be a Christian. I didn't tell you to be one. That's your choice. Or you were introduced to this religion at a very innocent early age in your life. I didn't do that to you. go back to the person and be mad at them. But I have no right to tell you not to be a Christian. You have a right to be a Christian if that's what you want to be. I have a right to bring information out into the world and into the African community that says the contrary of that. In other words, I can have a right to say and bring proof now. Because every one of my books I've written does not contain any biblical references. It's all based off of human history as a discipline. And I have a $5,000 award to give to anybody of any race, creed, or color by name, including the Pope, that can repudiate me and history. When history and myself is saying that there's never been a man that ever walked the earth in human form of any race, creed, or color by the name of Jesus Christ. Repudiate that. I give you $5,000, but you have to use the discipline of history. You can't use biblical references. You can't use what you believe and what you have faith in. You can't use your emotions to try to make what you believe and what you have faith in right. No. Use the discipline of history and write it up like I did. The same thing with Islam. The same thing with Judaism. I have a $5,000 award. Now, if you can't do it, if you know someone that can do it, I'll give you a $2,000 award as a finder's fee.
Walter, I'm not going to hold you much longer. I won't ask you too many more questions, but there are a few that I wanted to get into. One of the questions, we're talking about the chronology of ancient Egypt. How old, in your research, would you say ancient Egypt, the ancient Egyptian civilization is? How far back does it go?
I mentioned that earlier. It's 10,000 BC.
10,000 BC.
BC, yeah. See, people have, when you study history as a discipline, we're talking about human history. You have to, in any subject that you study, you have to go and find the origin of that study or that subject. And when you go back and study humanity as a history, a discipline, you have to go back or you should go back and want to find the oldest civilization or the first and oldest civilization ever existing on planet Earth. And that civilization you will find will be the ancient Egyptians, starting 10,000 BC. Okay? That's the world's oldest civilized people or civilization that ever existed on planet Earth. Okay? Why? Because what causes me to say that? When you go and look for the world's first and oldest civilization, you got to also look for proof of that. Is that you have to also look for a people living anywhere on earth that had the world's first form of writing. Whoever had the world's first form of writing is the oldest people. And there's no prior older civilization than the ancient Egyptians because they were the only literate people on planet Earth. They had the world's first form of writing, the hieroglyphics, the metanatural hieroglyphics, the hieratic, cursive, phonetic alphabet, etc., etc. And they created the world's first form of writing by way of creating the first alphabet. And the alphabet can only be created one time. Then, after that, you need to find out the second oldest civilization, which is coming out of India, which started in the Indus Valley, 2500, not to exceed 3000 BC. See? Then you look for the third oldest civilization, which is China. You see? Starting with 1500, not to exceed 2000 BC. See? That's the third oldest civilization. And then you look and go into Europe. The Europeans tell you they don't know a beginning history for themselves. They can't tell you a beginning history for them. They said that their history started with the Iliad and the Odyssey with Homer. But see, I have destroyed Homer because in order to have a history, you have to have a writing system. Greeks had no writing system. See? To document anything. You see? You see? So when history, when a person studies history, history is broken up into races. The black race, as they call it, which is the African race. That's the ancient Egyptians, like I just mentioned. The brown race, which is the people of India, like I just mentioned. The yellow race. The Chinese is the yellow race, like I mentioned. Then you get to the white race, and that's where it stopped. They don't know any beginning history for them. They'll tell you that right off the bat. You see? But now, when you get up to the second Renaissance era of Europe, the first Renaissance era was in 1500, which is the age of arts and crafts, the age of building. Second Renaissance, 100 years later, is called the age of learning. In the age of learning, they began to build learning institutions. You see? But the first learning institution in Europe came about during the time of the last years of the Hagia Sophia, because that was the world's first, not only the world's first Christian church, it was the world's first institution of learning for the Europeans. That was in Africa. And it was the African scholars who were their teachers.
Africa, where about in Africa?
In Constantinople, in Turkey.
Yeah.
At the Church of Hagia Sophia.
And that was their first learning?
University, yes, correct. See, and they were taught by African scholars and African teachers. See, because our ancestors had the first seed of civilization, and all civilization, all writing forms came from that one source, the ancient Egyptian. Now, when the Hagia Sophia was going to be, just before it was going to be torn down, not torn down, but taken over by the Ottoman Turkish Empire, that seat was moved out of Constantinople, out of the Hagia Sophia, the first seat of Christianity, and moved into Europe. You see, that happened when John VIII in 1439 went to Florence and Ferrara and relinquished his authority over the Church of Hagia Sophia, world's first Christian church, and the first seat of Christianity, which was in Constantinople, Turkey, to be the seat to be transferred to Europe. And that's when Eugenius IV and Nicholas V began to build the Vatican over the catacombs, like I mentioned before. See? And they beginning to build St. Peter's Church in 1445 over those catacombs. Now, so where did the learning center go? Because the Hagia Sophia was the learning center for Europeans, so where did the learning center go in Europe? Because it was imminent that the Ottoman Turks under Muhammad II, who penetrated the double-walled city of Constantinople in 1453 by using a cannon to blow a hole in the side of the walls of the Hagia Sophia and enter Constantinople to seize the Hagia Sophia. And they made the Hagia Sophia the prototype for all future mosques to be built. Okay? It was Mohammedanism. There was no Islam then, but it was Mohammedanism then. My book, The Historical Origin of Islam, tells you about Mohammedanism and when Islam first came in. Islam is a religion based upon a book called the Quran, and the Quran began to be created in 1870 in Syria by a group of Jewish scholars, Christian scholars, and Arabs who collaborated on the creation of that Quran. And it took them 49 years before it was accepted by the Arab world in 1919 in Cairo, Egypt. Okay, that's Islam began in 1919. And the first meeting in Islam's history took place in 1926. Okay, in what the area that we call in the Hijaz, in Mecca. Okay, that's in my book, The Historical Origin of Islam. So one should get that and read that. But let's get back to what happened to that university that was in the Hagia Sophia. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, it was being transferred. The seat of Christianity was being transferred to Europe, right? Mm-hmm. So what happened to that university? It went into Florence, Italy. You see, under the title of Curia, C-U-R-I-A. A curia is nothing but a college. That's all it is. And the teacher in Florence, Italy, was an African by the name of Manuel Chrysoloras. That was his name, Manuel Chrysoloras. Manuel, the golden teacher, the golden mouth teacher. That's what Chrysoloras means. So he was their teacher there in those curias. Two of his pupils became connected with the Roman Catholic Church. One, Poggio Bracciolini, was one of them, and Leonardo Bruni was another one. Those are two of his two students, and they became when the Vatican was beginning to be built in 1445. They became and called Roman curias. See? Because they was attached to the Roman Catholic Church on the outskirts of Rome. That's technical. Now, what other Roman, remember I told you that the word curia, C-U-R-I-A, means college, right? Now, Poggio Bracciolini and Leonardo Bruni took care of the business for the Vatican. You see? Just like the College of Cardinals do today. That's the reason how the College of Cardinals got their name. From being Roman curias. See? Like I said, the word curia means college. See, all these things you can find out by studying history. And nobody's talking about it. I seem to be the only one.
Now, are you saying that the university system, which was transferred from the Hagia Sophia into the Vatican, became the first university, and the church then, the Roman Catholic Church, became the instrument for the learned Europeans, or for you? Well, how?
See, you have to take the Vatican as a separate entity. Now you got outside of that Vatican, because see, at this point, when the seat of Christianity was transferred out of Africa, out of Constantinople, to Hagia Sophia, into Europe, once that seat was transferred out of Europe, what did the Vatican wanted to do? They wanted to separate the church from the state. So you couldn't have what you just said. So they have to be independent. So that's where the curias come in. And that's where the Second Renaissance, the Age of Learning, come in. They began to have a school system and create a school system. You see, independent of the Vatican. But it happens that two of the Roman curias that are attached to the Vatican, who took care of the business of the Vatican, came out of that curia college system, independent college system. See, had nothing to do with the Roman Catholic Church. Now you got a different system altogether coming into being. You see?
What was the African impact on that system and its development? And perhaps you can bring in the Moors and who were the Moors.
Well, okay.
Or is that too early?
Well,
period of time?
No, not really. Not really. The Moors had already been in Spain prior to prior to the 15th century. They went into Spain in the 11th century, middle of the 11th century. But
I thought that the Vatican, the transfer of Hagia Sophia into the Vatican, was in the 5th century.
That's historically incorrect. This is what they are trying to tell the people today. In fact, they don't give you no date about the Vatican. Okay? They just say the first church. And then they have you look at the Vatican. No, no, sir.
Well, what period are we talking about?
We're talking about the 15th century. When the Vatican, when John VIII, like I mentioned, went into Florence and Ferrara, Italy, and relinquished his authority over that seat and the church of Hagia Sophia, the world's first Christian church.
Well, up until
relinquish his authority over that church and seat to be transferred into Europe. Of which he gave it away. Now, what kept his authority over the seat of Christianity in Constantinople, Turkey, in Northeast Africa, and the Hagia Sophia, what gave him his authority over that was the donation of Constantine that I mentioned in my Historical Origin of Christianity book. Mm-hmm. Okay? From that, when he relinquished his authority, he relinquished the donation of Constantine. That donation of Constantine gave him authority over that church and over the seat of Christianity. It's explained in my book, Historical Origin of Christianity. So when that was done, you see, now the Europeans has taken over. But when the Europeans took over the seat of Christianity, they separated the seat of Christianity from the state. They didn't want the state to be involved in their religious business.
Okay, I am somewhat confused. And I want you to go back over this for me, please. And I'm not going to hold you too much longer. But I wanted to look at that period of time when Africans built the Hagia Sophia, was a teaching staff in the Hagia Sophia. When did that period of time end? When they were no longer the teachers and overseers.
Okay. Let's go back to the beginning of when the first church was built. And the first university was built for Europeans, which is the Hagia Sophia. It was commissioned in 532 by Justinian and his wife Theodora. Mm-hmm. They commissioned African architects to design that building that we know today as the Hagia Sophia and to build it. Once designed and built, the staff, the teaching staff, was staffed by African teachers, African scholars. Now we talk about the 6th century, 532, and beginning to be built and finished 5 years later, 537. Mm-hmm. Let's go back now from the 6th century all the way up until the 15th century, that existed. Okay?
With primary African
teachers. Yes, sir.
In the Hagia Sophia.
In the Hagia Sophia.
Which was the first university.
For Europeans.
Right. So Europeans were coming into North Africa, Turkey, mm-hmm. for learning.
Northeast Africa, to learn, yes. That was a learning center.
Okay.
See, but they didn't have, the masses of Europeans could not read or write. Mm-hmm. These are only like rich monarchs and merchants would send their children there to learn how to read and write. You see? But the masses of people in Europe could not read or write until the 16th century when they started a school system for them called the Renaissance era.
Who started that school system?
The school system was started after Johannes Gutenberg had invented the printing press in 1437 mm-hmm. with movable print, mm-hmm. even though the Chinese had movable print in the 12th and 13th century. But it wasn't until Johannes Gutenberg in 1437 created a printing press with movable print in Europe he needed money, so he borrowed money from Johannes Fuss, F-U-S-T, a goldsmith, who loaned him money at a high interest rate. And he couldn't pay it back, so that printing press was confiscated. Mm-hmm. So here you have a printing press with movable print in Europe, and you can print up thousands of books and pieces of literature, but the Europeans can't read or write. Mm-hmm. You see? Only a hand-picked few. The masses of Europeans could not read or write. Mm-hmm. See? So now you have this printing press that could do and produce all these books and literature and so forth and so on. Okay? Now, when the Renaissance, that's the 15th century, right? Mm-hmm. The 16th century came the second Renaissance era, the Age of Learning. Mm-hmm. See? Now you got the seat of Christianity in Europe. You got the printing press, removable print, and the people who own the printing press said, now, what good is this printing press going to do me? I can print up thousands of books, but nobody's to read them. Mm-hmm. So they began to say, okay, let's start a school system. That's where the Age of Learning came in, on your second Renaissance era, 16th century. Mm-hmm. So they began to build schools, and they began to teach the Europeans in the secular community. Mm-hmm. And they developed a curriculum, which I mentioned before, of how they use incarnated names, such as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and Herodotus, and Homer, and so forth and so on, to say that these characters that are non-human live as human beings. Mm-hmm. You see? Mm-hmm. So, and teach them other subjects. So that's how that came about. Mm-hmm. See? So, and then I mentioned to you that this Hagia Sophia, the world's first university, was taken over by Muhammad II, the Ottoman Turk, in 1453. Mm-hmm. And the Europeans, before he penetrated the double-walled city of Constantinople, they were taking manuscripts out of that Hagia Sophia by boatloads, taking them back to Europe, mm-hmm. taking them to those curias over there. Mm-hmm. The curia, like I said, C-U-R-I-A, means college. Mm-hmm. See? And they took them back over there, and Manuel Chrysoloras was their teacher, an African was their teacher. Mm-hmm. See? And they began to learn one by one until the school system got up, and then they began to build all the schools and things all over Europe.
Mm-hmm. Finally, Walter, if you can deal as extensively as you can, because this is the last question I will ask you, dealing with the Moors. Who were the Moors? At what time did they first go into Europe? And what was the impact of the Moors in Europe?
Okay. The Moors are Africans. In some literature, they're known as the Blackamoors. I don't want the listener to be confused about the Saracen Moors. There's never been any Saracen Moors. Those are Europeans that are created by using incarnated names, like I mentioned before. Okay? The reason why I'm saying there's never been a Saracen Moor is that they said a Saracen Moor entered Spain and brought a civilization to Spain. And they also introduced Islam to and in Spain. Historically incorrect. Mm-hmm. Islam as a religion did not come about until the Quran was accepted by the Arab world in 1919 in Cairo, Egypt, after being formulated beginning in 1870 in Syria by Jewish scholars and writers, and Christian scholars and writers, and Arab scholars. In 1870, it took 49 years for the development and the acceptance of that Quran. In 1919 in Cairo, Egypt. And Islam is a religion based upon a book called the Quran, without the book called the Quran, you have no Islam. Okay? But prior to 1919, you did have Mohammedanism. Now, so that's the reason why I said there was no Saracen. They used this word Saracen, or Saracen, Moors, to diminish the greatness of the Moors, of the real African Moors, who went into Spain in 1051. They went into Spain in 1051 to bring and build the second civilization in the world in Spain in the mid-11th century. They are called the real Moors. Okay? They went in there in 1051. Okay? Not no Saracen Moors, so don't get confused. You see something that says Saracen Moors or Saracen Moors, throw it out. And I mentioned it in my book, The Historical Origin of Islam, about the Saracen Moors, about 2 or 3 places in there. So the real Moors are the African Moors. And what they did, they brought a high civilization to pagan, heathen, uncivilized Spain in the 11th century, mid-11th century. Okay? And they used for decorative purpose, they used and decorated some of their buildings with what is known as the Arabic script. You'll see that script that is known today as the Arabic script. They use that for decoration as well as for writing, because that's a derivative of the ancient Egyptian hieratic demotic script. If you get my book, or both books, I have an alphabet chart in each book. And to the very extreme left, in the first column, you got the hieroglyphic pictorial symbols, which have never been deciphered. And then you got the hieratic demotic script, the second and the third. And you see how how the scripts are being drawn to create what is known as the Arabic script. They used that and brought that into Spain for decorative purposes and writing purposes. And they were run out of Spain by Ferdinand and Isabella, and for racial and religious reasons, because Spain now in the 15th century, they began to run out of there. They embraced Catholicism by way of the Roman Catholic Church.
The Moors?
No, I said the Spaniards.
Okay.
And they wanted to get rid of the Moors out of there for racial and religious reasons, because those Moors over there was practicing Mohammedanism, didn't practice no Islam, because Islam was all throughout Venice, Italy, and any type of the Moors was nothing but a descendant of the ancient Egyptians. That's all they are and were. You see, descendant of the ancient Egyptians. It's just like we Africans born in America, we are called Negroes, blacks, and we call ourselves blacks and African Americans. We're the descendants of the ancient Egyptians. But at a certain history, we became Negroes. At a certain time in history,